Good morning, everyone. Before I begin, just want to let everyone know that the calls, all callers are being muted, so we'll have an opportunity to answer questions or give you an opportunity to ask questions at the end. So I hope everybody's doing well, and thank you for allowing me to share your time today. Today's webinar is going to be on Analysis Cubes Basics. I have to emphasize the basics portion because this is not going to be for the intended audience for anybody that's at an advanced level. So I hope to not disappoint, but again, we're going to really focus on the basics for those that don't have any kind of familiarity with the analysis cubes. I'm going to kind of take it from the very introductory level. So, my name is Robert Sawyer, and I am a consultant with IBIS. Prior to joining IBIS, I served 20 years in the Marine Corps. I have a master's degree in business intelligence. I also have an MBA, and also I am master certified in Dynamics GP. Now, let me give you a little bit of a spoiler alert. I know that your has this class lasting for 1 hour. I do believe we'll be able to cover everything in 20 to 30 minutes. And the reason why I didn't have it extended to the full hour is simply because it's still going to be a lot of information we're going to cover in a very short period of time. And I want everyone to have the ability to take away something instead of me just basically applying a fire hose of information, and really at the end you might be more confused than whenever you began. So without further ado, let's just go ahead and look at the agenda for today. And I know that I can see there's a little bit of a slight delay. There we go. Okay, so let's go ahead and go over the agenda. Just some basic things. So we're going to talk about business intelligence as a whole, just a brief overview. Because analysis cubes is an integral part of business intelligence, any kind of business intelligence platform. You know, what are analysis cubes? Getting into some of the terminology that you'll hear when it comes to business intelligence and analysis cubes, the hierarchies, dimensions, and measures. We're going to talk a little bit about the system requirements, get into some cube components. We're going to also dissect the interface a little bit, and then I'm going to do a brief demo on how to create a cube connection. Okay, so now that we've covered the agenda, let's touch base a little bit on business intelligence as a whole. So, in 1958, the term business intelligence was first used by Hans P. Loon in an IBM journal and defined as the ability to apprehend the interrelationships of presented facts in such a way as to guide actions towards a desired goal. Now that is a mouthful. In 1989, Howard Dresner, a Gartner Fellow, defined BI as the concepts and methods to improve business decision-making, using fact-based support systems. So, with all that being said, and the definition itself continues to evolve, what we find is that BI today is still a content-free term. Now, what that means is that it means so many different things to so many different people. So I wanted to make sure, at least after we've covered a little bit of the history of BI, or where the term actually began, that we'll kind of define it at least in terms of this webinar, so we're all speaking from the same page. So, let's talk about defining BI, at least just for our webinar. So, for this webinar, and from what I've seen regarding various levels of decision makers within a business, a recurring theme without being formally defined is that BI is the right information at the right time within the right resources available, and this also has to be targeted to the end users and budget. So, at IBIS, one of our premier BI tools is called Analysis Cubes. Additionally, IBIS is one of the few consulting firms in North America that is certified in 4 separate competencies, one of which is business intelligence. Now, it's going to look somewhat like a complicated and over-engineered picture, but I wanted to kind of illustrate to you, in talking about analysis cubes, not only give you a kind of a picture of what I'm referring to, but also kind of give you an idea of what analysis cubes means, multidimensional analysis, and how much of a granular detail that you can get when it comes to slicing and dicing, a term that you might have heard. So before and this is called Olap, which is Online Analytical Processing. So before Olap technology was well developed, data, it had to be extracted from databases using queries. Now, for those of you that aren't familiar with queries, it's a very specific database type of language. It's not coding, but it's a way that you as the end user would communicate with the database and ask for certain types of information to be arranged in certain types of ways. Now, queries meant that the analyst had to structure a request to the database for the information desired, what I've already covered, and then submit this query to the database. Now, depending on your capabilities within your environment, this includes your server, this includes your connectivity, the size of the database, the amount of information requested. This query could take anywhere from minutes to multiple hours. And so, obviously, for the end user not being, or even not just the end user, but whoever, the business decision maker needing certain types of information, not being familiar with query language, it makes it very difficult, makes it very cumbersome. It made you more dependent on, say, for example, an IT department or a business analyst. And so analysis cubes, as technology has continued to evolve, analysis cubes is one of the most efficient analysis tools available and most cost efficient. It allows the end user to leverage their Excel skills, so something I think generally everyone has to at least a beginner to intermediate level nowadays. While at the same time this will empower you to get you the kind of information that you need, basically a self-service BI environment, and allow you to become more independent, and allow you also to create various ad hoc reports as you need. Now, there are some terms, again, because this is a basic class and not trying to insult anyone's intelligence as at a more advanced level, but there are terms that you might hear when it comes to any type of business intelligence, analysis cubes, and so forth. So I want to cover a little bit about those today and kind of give you also what I hope is a better explanation, so you can at least at the end of the webinar take a few items away that will give you maybe cause for additional research. So hierarchies. This is an arrangement of related attributes into separate levels. So for example, as you can kind of see in this picture, you could create a date hierarchy. And you notice that there are multiple levels, and by using the month attribute as the lowest level. And then what you could do is add intermediate levels made of members of the quarter and year attributes. So once you added all those, you could add one more level at the very top of the date hierarchy, and this would be called the all level. The all level would contain a single member, all dates, that is the aggregation of all members of the year level. I hope what I thought was going to be a simple explanation didn't confuse anyone, but as you could tell, it just gives you different ranges in different ways to analyze data, is the best way that I could describe it. Dimensions is another term that you'll also hear quite often. So dimensions provide metadata, which is basically data about data. That it turns numerical data into information, and it makes analysis possible. So the dimensions provide the descriptive labels for the numbers and let you know how the data should be grouped, sorted, formatted, and aggregated. Just a small example using one of the Microsoft test databases, EventualWorks. Here's a very small example of a dimension. And one last term that I want to cover also is measures, which is, again, it's once you start looking into business analysis, business intelligence, this is another one of those terms that you'll hear quite often. So measures, they're a set of values that are based on a column. They have central values of a cube that can be analyzed. They're usually numerical data. And so in a cube, a measure is a set of values that, again, I've already discussed, is based on a column, usually numeric, and they are they are measures of the numeric data of primary interest to end users browsing a cube. So, for example, to find sales, if you can follow on the screen, find sales of product C in 2003 in Dallas, the product, time, and city are dimensions that are used to identify the cell that contains the required value. Okay, now we're going to cover just a little bit about system requirements. Because the system requirements, discussing these items are in detail beyond what the scope of this class or this webinar is going to be covering, I wanted to at least kind of give you a little bit of a background regarding the system requirements. If your current environment contains only a single server, it is still possible to utilize analysis cubes without having to incur significant capital expenditure, but it will, however, depend on an assessment that your BI team at IBIS can conduct upon request. So, long story made short, depending on what your environment setup is now, it is possible, if you have Dynamics GP 2010 installed, you have obviously the SQL Server stack. It is possible to have the analysis cubes installed in your current environment. However, some of the changes that might be recommended will be based on performance and so forth, and so that's what will be covered during an on-site or even remote discovery. So, let's talk a little bit about analysis cube components. What I hope is not a confusing graph is kind of gives you at least a better picture of what I'm hoping of what analysis cube components consist of. So aside from GP company databases, which you could have multiple, and Olap viewers, which in this case our Olap viewer, remember it's online analytical processing, is going to be Excel. Analysis cubes is comprised of 4 different elements. Primarily it's going to be a data warehouse maintained with the SQL Server database engine, a SQL Server Analysis Services Database, or SSAS, several integration packages, or you might have heard of SSIS, and a cube load and data processing job, which is something that is automated by a tool within SQL Server called the SQL Server Agent. Okay, this is what the actual interface consists of, and as you can tell, it is from an Excel view. So if the other diagrams and explanations seemed a bit confusing, I hope that this kind of puts you a little bit at ease. I want to kind of go through each one of those components, and then I'm going to actually demo on how to create a cube connection. So a pivot table period, for those of you that are not familiar with pivot tables, it displays aggregated views of data easily and in an understandable layout. So it could be hundreds or thousands of pieces of underlying information that can be aggregated on rows, columns, column axes, revealing the meanings behind the data. So pivot table reports are used to organize and summarize your data in different ways. Now, if you take a look to the left, the pivot table pane, this is where the report is going to be built. If you notice also to your right, where the pivot table field list is, this is where most of your interaction with the pivot table will occur within the context of the field list. Measures or measure groups are always found at the top of the pivot table field list, which is right below the pivot table field list, and they are easily identified by the sigma symbol. Okay, and I think you can see it there where it says bank transactions or bank trans. Within each measure group, we can expect to see several related measures. So as you can tell with the accounts, you'll have accounts by account number, accounts by category. We're going to use, in an analysis cubes environment, you would use these measures to generate the numeric values about your report. Okay, so dimensions comprise the actual values in the report. And then last but not least, the area section is where divided into 4 separate parts, each controlling the different aspect of the pivot table report. So in order to build a pivot table, attributes and measures must be selected or dragged from the field section into one of these 4 areas. And as you add and remove various attributes and measures from the area section, the pivot table pane will constantly adjust, and that's where you're going to see actually your values reflect. So, with that being said, what I'm going to do, and everyone will have access, so you can If you do already have analysis cubes, this is something that you can follow through and connect. You'll obviously need some additional information regarding not only security permissions but the name of your database server. But just to kind of walk you through the basics again on how to connect to, or excuse me, how to create a cube connection, I'm going to go ahead and switch to the live portion here. So here's something I've already created with an analysis cube connection. And as you can tell from what we've already talked about, how you slice and dice the data is going to provide you, in this particular example, I used a filter to filter the year. I know it's a fictional year. And I wanted to see, okay, by profit detail, each customer within 2016. So, and then the aggregate amount is $180,274.87. Now, you can also use any of your basic Excel functionality and arrange. So that's pretty simple. And you can arrange it however you want it, again, using basic Excel functionality. What I want to do is go ahead and walk through how to actually connect to an analysis cube connection. So from the Data tab, you go to From Other Sources, go to From Analysis Services. The server name in this instance is my name, since I have it locally installed on my laptop, and I'm going to use Windows Authentication. And here are an example. We actually have more customized cubes that we've developed here at IBIS, but strictly out of the box installation implementation. Here are all the various cubes that you have available. So for this demonstration, I'm just going to click the Sales cube. I'm going to click Next. For easy reference, what I would always suggest after the next portion, on friendly name, I would shorten that a little bit and just make it simple. So now you have Analysis Cube Sales. Click Finish. I've already done this before, so I'm going to go ahead and overwrite. I would always suggest to go to the far left-hand pane so you give yourself as much space as possible. And so now we have the basic, I guess you could say, presentation layer of the analysis cubes. Now, if you want to move the pivot table because this is a little bit too constrained for your view, you can always move it just by clicking on the Move Pivot Table right under the Options tab of the Pivot Table Tools. Select a different location, click OK, and there you go. But I'm going to go ahead and move it back. Now, let's see if we can go ahead and duplicate a little bit about some of the things that you've already seen. So we wanted to see let's go to company name, actually customer names. We're going to use that as the row label. Drop that in there. We're going to, so we want to provide a filter. So we're going to go to the master date, and for this instance what we're going to do is choose year. Instead of all, because that'll just be an aggregate of all the information, which you can choose. I'm going to go ahead and choose 2016, and actually what we can do just to add a little bit of variety, we can go ahead and choose 2017. Okay. Now, clicking on profit detail. Now remember, this is a combination of, and don't worry about that if it disappears, it's still going to be there once you move over into the navigation pane. And here you have, again, from multiple years, we can arrange this just like as what I've explained before with Excel functionality. You can arrange that from smallest to largest or vice versa. You can create, if you wanted to, a real quick, say for example of your top, we'll go with top 5 customers, and you wanted to create a quick chart, just press F11 and a quick chart. Again, of course, you would have to do some editing to make this more presentable, but again, presenting a chart or developing a chart within, basically seconds versus, how long it might take if you're not familiar with some of the shortcuts. And again, from beginning to end, I think our whole process. Now, I understand also that the implementation will take longer, so I don't want to present an unrealistic expectation as if we can install analysis cubes in seconds or minutes. But once it's installed and there's some editing based on your environment, the types of analysis that you can do based on the information that your Dynamics GP system is collecting, it's really limitless, and it gives you, again, drag and drop. None of this information that you're doing within this environment is changing anything. This is just how you're viewing it. So you can't, if you erase the data, it doesn't erase anything other than your view. And as you can see, it's just simply drag and drop. So really easy functionality. Okay. Now, I want to make sure that I give credit where credit is due. The majority or a large portion of the information covered today was actually from Chris Liley's and David Duncan's book called Microsoft Dynamics GP 2010 Reporting. They are actually also part of the BI team here at IBIS and have had more than 50 Analysis Cube implementations, and both are also Master Certified in Dynamics GP. I did also reference the SQL Server 2008 analysis step-by-step, and another good resource is TechNet, and you can see the website there, the link. So I know that might have seemed relatively fast. We covered a tremendous amount of information in a very short period of time. I wrestled with this idea as I was putting together this webinar on how much information is included in just the basics. And so just even covering the basic information, I don't want to, I guess you could say, place the fear in anyone that you're not capable of interacting with this type of tool. With a little bit of training that we can obviously provide and a little bit of guidance on environment setup, it's pretty simple. And again, from beginning to end of once your actual analysis cubes are installed, it could be just a matter of minutes before you're analyzing the data maybe that you've been depending on others to provide that have maybe taken weeks or even months at sometimes in some instances from what I've heard. So if you have any questions, please feel free to email at info@ibisinc.com. Listen, I really appreciate sharing your time today, allowing me to share your time. We have some additional webinars that I would encourage you to peruse through. I think there's a lot of great information. And then again, if you have any questions, please give us an email, send us an email at info@ibisinc.com. Thank you for your time.